This is Mr. Hernandez, and I'm here with your guys' next engineering lesson. This one is going to be all about tables and charts. And just to give you a heads up, you do have a quiz on this information, so make sure you have a notebook out. And as we go through, anything that's in yellow is something that's important and should be in your notebooks. So go ahead and pause if you need to get your notebook out, and let's go ahead and jump right in. So we're going to be talking about today is how we can use your computer to organize data. And whenever we see that word data, you want to think information. So this could be numbers, this could be labels or names. It could be any kind of information that we're trying to organize. And the main tool that we're going to use is Google Sheets. And with Google Sheets, we can quickly create tables and graphs with our data. And that's going to make it a lot easier to show and present and understand this information. Make it more than just numbers and names. There are other spreadsheet tools that we can use, like Microsoft Excel, but Google Sheets is the one that we use at Linux, so we're going to focus on that one today. Now, go ahead and pause if you need to write this down, and we can move on after that. So we're starting off with a lot of information. I promise the rest of the slides won't be this heavy with notes, but we do need to get some basic terminology down first. So these are our basic spreadsheet terms. So the building block of the spreadsheet is a cell, and a cell is a rectangular box used to hold data. With spreadsheets, that's usually numbers, but it can be other things. Now, if we take those cells and we start stacking them up horizontally, that's a row. So a row is a horizontal or sideways, going this direction, set of cells. And pretty much universally, rows are going to be numbered. So you have row 1, row 2, row 3, and so on. Next, we get to columns. So if we take our cells and we have them stacked up and down vertically, that is called a column. And columns are going to be labeled by letters. So those are going to be A, B, C, and so on. So if we take an individual cell, we can find it by its address, essentially. We can figure out what row it's on and what column it's on. And pretty much all the time, the column is going to come first. So you'll see these locations being labeled as, for example, A1, B1, C5, but you'll notice that it's always the letter first, and the letter is what corresponds to the column. So I understand there's a lot here, so pause, make sure that all that's written down, and once you're done with that, we can go ahead and move forward. So this is what a table is. And I'm splitting this off because tables can either be one of two things. So a table can be one section of a spreadsheet, just one thing that we're really focusing on. But it can also be kind of a mini spreadsheet that you can put into other documents. And we're going to actually play with this a little bit, but you can actually take a section of a spreadsheet and cut it out and put it somewhere else, like into a presentation or into a document, where if you're writing like an essay or a report. And this table, since it's a mini spreadsheet, it does the same job. It organizes your data into specific rows and columns, and that's going to help you to create graphs and show your information. So as always, pause if you need more time to write this down. And once you're ready, we're going to take a look at an example of this. So this is a table. And you can see we've got the outline, we've got the whole spreadsheet here, but the table is just this one section of it. And let's go ahead and see how all of this corresponds. So the first thing that we can see is these are the columns. And you can see they are in fact labeled. We've got column A, B, C, D, and this is what they look like. We've also got rows going side to side, and these rows, they are numbered. So this is row 2, everything in this line. This is row 3, everything in this line. And that's how the rows work. So we can also identify the individual cells. So this is one cell by itself, and this holds the information 9,933. Um, and in this case, that looks like that's how many cars Chrysler sold in a given month. But this is what spreadsheets are good for. They can show lots and lots of information. Okay, so this is how you're going to find this cell's address. So first, you look up and figure out what column it's in. So this is what column that cell is in. Then you go back to the cell and you go to the left and you figure out what row it's in. So this is what row it's in. So we go up and figure out it's in column B. That's the first part. And then we go to the left and figure out it's in row 5. That means that the address for this cell is B5. So this right here is cell B5 and it contains this value. So that's how tables work. Now let's go ahead and move forward here. And we're going to take a look at charts now. So the first one we're going to look at is a pie chart. And a pie chart is a chart that shows the fraction or the percentage of your data compared to the rest of the data. So for example, if we did a survey and we asked a lot of people if they like cats or dogs better, we could put that into a pie chart and show what percent of people like cats and what percent of people like dogs. So this is an example of that. Let me go back so you guys have enough time to write this down though. So remember, you can pause here in order to finish writing down the information about the pie chart, and then we can look at an example. So here is an example. You can see why it's called a pie chart. It's kind of like you're taking a pie and cutting out slices of it, and the size of the slice shows you what percentage that is. So in this case, somebody was making a filter, and these are the materials that they used. And 82% of that filter was made out of gravel. And you can see just how much of that filter was gravel, and everything else is just a much smaller part of it. That's what pie charts are good for. Now let's go ahead and move on to the bar graph. So a bar graph isn't great for percentages. Instead, it shows you a measurement or an amount of your data. This is really good for numbers. So if we did that same survey and we wanted to show how many people like dogs, not the percentage, but just the actual number, this is what we would use. So we could do number of people who like dogs and number of people who like cats instead of percentages. So go ahead and pause if you need more time to write this down, and we'll look at an example here too. So this is that same information from the previous pie chart, but shown as a bar graph. And what's interesting here is that you can still see gravel made up a lot of this filter, and you can see that everything else was a lot smaller. One thing that this makes a little bit more difficult to see is how all of these together stack up against gravel. It's hard to tell that all three, if you put them together, still make up a very small amount. But it is better at showing that there's a bit more sand than coffee and a bit more coffee filters than noodles. So that's what a bar graph is good for. Now let's move on from here. And this is kind of the reasoning behind why you would choose one graph or another. Each of them is good at a different thing. So if you want to show percentages, especially for something like polling, if you're doing opinions, that's great for a pie chart, because for a pie chart, you want to know who has the largest percent. And especially for something like voting, which is in the news a lot these days, you want to know who has over 50% or who's closest to getting over 50%. So this is important here. And when you're doing voting, it's not so important how many people are in each category. What's really important is the percentage that's in each category. For another example though, if we were trying to show how much money we had raised with a sale, in that case we might show a bar graph. because then we could see not just who had the most, because they would have the tallest bar, we could see how much each section raised. For example, if we had a fundraiser at school where each class was competing to raise the most money, we could give each class their own bar, and we could then show who did the best in that fundraiser. And there are also situations where it's best to use both, and that'll come up occasionally as well. All right, engineers, so that's the end of this presentation. So make sure you took good notes and get ready for that quiz that's coming up.